Welcome to the Stack of Stats podcast. I am Pam Maldonado, and the band is back. We have Gill Gross, we have Drew Dinsick, and that can only mean one thing, that Australian Open tennis, ATP tennis is back. With me is Gill Gross. He is the broadcaster for the Tennis Channel. He is also the host of the Cracked Rackets. You can also find him on Monday Match Analysis on YouTube. Drew Dinsick, he is an analyst for NBC Sports Bet. He's also part of the Bet the Edge podcast and the Deep Dive podcast. My guys, I am so happy to have you with me. Australian Open. It came really freaking fast. So came out of nowhere. How are you guys feeling about tennis being back?
I don't feel prepared.
I
definitely, I mean, this is a unique tournament every year because there are surprises. There's players come in out of shape. They're not necessarily pointing towards this tournament. They're like, okay, well, I played deep into last season. This is going to be tough. I might use this as an opportunity to get a little prize money, a little points, maybe, get myself in some game shape. Other players spend the entire offseason fashioning certain tools, coming in with a very different approach to their game. And so there's a little chaos when it comes to trying to handicap this. Every single year, it's a little like, wow, oh man, I'll never forget the year that Dennis Istomin beat Djokovic in like round 2, and they, that was the most absurd upset I think I've ever seen in the sport of tennis. That same year, Misha Zverev took Andy Murray out of the draw super early, and that paved the way for one of the all-time fun matches of Federer versus Nadal in that final. Yeah, it's always a little interesting how this tournament breaks. Last year we didn't really get a fair shake because there was no Djokovic, so excited to see what these guys bring this year. And I feel like the men's tour in general, accepting the injury to Alcaraz, is in pretty good shape right now.
Gil, so Drew and I, we kind of pivot towards the end after the US Open to football, the NFL, we have college football. You stay in the mix. You're now a broadcaster for Tennis Channel. Is there anything that maybe Drew and I might have missed in the last couple of months that we're not really, like he said, he's feeling underprepared. I'm also feeling underprepared. We got the NFL playoffs coming into play right now. So is there anything that we might be overlooking so early on? Is it just me, or like, it just feels like it came so fast?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the nature of tennis. There's no off season essentially. I mean, you have a guy like Ruud saying, I'm going to take my off season in February, because after the ATP finals, he went and played some exos with Nadal, which means he's still traveling. He's still out of hotels. He's not training. He's not resting. So, it's insane. But you guys checking out after the US Open might be an advantage. That might be an edge, guys, because, there's always a notion that players are going to continue some sort of momentum from the indoor hardcourt season of the fall. And usually we see that's just total baloney. It doesn't happen. So, I mean, Rune, Felix, they tore it up. They were incredible. Novak tore it up. But when it comes to FAA and Rune, like, you're probably looking at them going into this next season as just a little bit overvalued because of what they did. It has no bearing. We're outdoors now. It's been a month. It's a fresh start.
Exactly. And that's why I love the Australian Open, because everybody still uses kind of like old information. This is a brand new slate. Anything goes. When I saw the draw, I was like, holy heck, this is fun. If you saw this draw like 2, 3, even 5 years ago, I would have been like, this is going to be terrible, underwhelming. But I think only because we've seen so many players on the up and up, the playing field is kind of evened out. So now it is more competitive. Now it does make for an interesting storyline in each quarter. What were y'all's first reactions to seeing the ATP side of the Australian Open draw?
Drew? I think 1, 2, and 3 are pretty balanced. They all look competitive. You can make cases for a couple players in each section. And then 4 looks to me the weakest. And part of the reason is because of kind of what Gill alluded to with Ruud. Ruud was wildly unimpressive, losing to Laszlo Jiri this week. And if he is wearing the if he is subject to the wear and tear of all of the travel, not getting an off season to regroup, and in general not being in a surface that really lends itself to his strengths, then he may be and an early out in this one. But otherwise, happy that Medvedev and Djokovic are on opposite sides of the draw, not in the same quarter. They could have because the seeding was weird coming into this one. Like I had to do the math a couple times. Like, how in the world is Nadal the 1 seed in this tournament? How is Ruud the 2? Like, what? How did this work out? And so we could have ended up with a really bizarre draw, but I like what we have here. One of my good tennis friends kind of nailed, I thought, Q2. He was basically like, this looks like just like one of the world's best 250 fields. It's like, he's like, this is like exactly what you would find in a 250. It looks really, you have 4, somewhat evenly placed guys you could make a case for as your top 4 seeds there, and a lot of interesting challengers, up and comers, guys who are in form. So Q2 looks like the most fun. I guess I would call quarter 1 the quarter death, but only because there's kind of a bunch of kind of up and comer guys in there that I had circled for this tournament that I was excited to see where they landed, and they all landed in Q1. So maybe I would listen to a case that it's a little lopsided top and bottom, where the top is a little stronger, and the bottom is Djokovic's to lose. So, the tournament is Djokovic's to lose. So you got to kind of find other interesting ways. Yeah, right.
You can fast forward to however long this podcast is going to be, and you already know that we're probably all in agreement that Djokovic is the rightful favorite, and Djokovic is the rightful player to want to bat. Well, speaking of the odds, then you have Novak Djokovic as a -120 favorite, followed by Daniil Medvedev +550, Rafael Nadal 14-1, and then Stefanos Tsitsipas 14-1, and then Nick Kyrgios rounding out the top 5 at 16-1. Then let's start first with just like the top half of the draw. Then the top half is highlighted by Rafael Nadal. He is the Grand Slam leader. 2022 Australian Open finalist Daniil Medvedev, who's actually made back-to-back finals of the Australian Open. 2021 French Open finalist Stefanos Tsitsipas. I'm super interested in the top half. I know that it is very Djokovic at the bottom kind of owns it, but the top half, you said that it has a lot of interesting players, and it definitely does. I'm looking at the first quarter, and I don't know. I actually heard your podcast, Drew, and you were talking about fade Nadal, and I'm not ready to do that. I'm not ready to do that. And Gill, he made a perfect point at the beginning of this, where he said everything that happened in the last kind of months, kind of throw out the window. It's irrelevant. Gill, how are you attacking Nadal coming into this match, knowing what you just said?
It's tough because one of the things that we've seen is Nadal come in with not a lot of form and just work his way into majors. I mean, we see that with all of the great players, because you have an 128 player draw and 32 seeds. You can't play a seed until the 3rd round. You look at his US Open, I think who he played in the 2nd round, but the 1st round was Rinky Hijikata, and Nadal can be at, 70%, 65% maybe, and he can still beat Rinky Hijikata. And now he's got Jack Draper. So he's actually going to have to play well to win. There's no 2 ways about it. The reason why I'm not incredibly concerned about Nadal, although, I do think it's a very high risk first round, as does everybody, or as should everybody, is because, I don't think his record tells the story of his level in his first 2 matches of the year. I think against Norrie and de Minaur, he showed a lot of positive signs. Now, he served horribly, and that's the thing to watch for and the thing to circle. He needs to serve better, but a lot of what he was doing off the ground and how he was moving looked a lot better than the end of last year. Now you have Jack Draper, who is in Adelaide still playing. He's going to have to travel. He's going to have to get used to the conditions.
Yep.
That's not a good thing historically. Like, we've seen the last 2 winners of Adelaide lose in the first round of the Australian Open, Kokkinakis and Sinner, 2 years ago. And, you also just have that like best of 5 intangible factor where like you just like Nadal there in that sense. Now, I think Draper's a gamer and a baller, but Nadal still has an advantage there.
Well, then let's go ahead and talk about that match a little bit more. I know that Drew is on maybe backing Draper on an outright upset, and I'm definitely not there. He's 21 years old. He has only 6 total matches played in a major. Experience matters in a best of 5, and Draper is a lefty. Nadal, He owns lefties. 114-17 record in his career. His most recent loss was Cam Norrie at the United Cup. One, that's the United Cup. And two, Cam Norrie is a different player than Jack Draper, who has a lot more experience. He's played a lot more at the top level players. I would be interested in Draper, but if I didn't see that he had straight set losses to Karen Khachanov and Francis Tiafoe. And then, of course, he is playing late, deep into the tournament of Adelaide, too. Can he take a set off of Nadal? Probably, maybe. But I would say Nadal still gets this in 4 or better.
Wow. Okay. It's entirely possible. I mean, you got a young player like Draper. Does he come in a little tight? Is he up at some point in the match and like, oh my God, I'm beating Rafael Nadal? Like, yeah, of course. Those are very real possibilities. Like he could absolutely no show in this one, and it shouldn't shock anyone because the intangible part of it that Gill mentioned is kind of incalculable. Like you have one of the greatest players of all time in a major format, and he's going to find ways to make your life uncomfortable, even if you are the better player on that given day. We've seen numerous examples of this over the years. So yeah, I mean, Nadal should be favored. Sure. I don't really even love the price you get for Draper on the upset right now. You can find close to 2-1 for him to pull off the upset, which my numbers say is value, just because, I mean, Nadal's since the injury in Wimbledon with the ab has not really shown you any kind of the kind of top level that he showed you at the beginning half of last season when he was on that incredible run. All of this said, though, like there are plenty of ways to make money in tennis.
Yeah.
Fading Rafa Nadal has never been a good one.
It's not a profitable one.
It's never really been a good, yeah. So,
I should rewind to our 2022 Australian Open preview where all three of us were like, fade Nadal, he's not going to do anything. And then he comes out and wins the entire time.
Yeah. I think we had less of an idea of what was going on just because he had played a little less tennis in the fall last year than he did this year. The tennis we saw from him in the fall this year was not it's
not even just the normal play.
Guy.
It's not even just the play. Yeah. He saw his best friend Roger Federer retire.
Sure.
That has like an emotional type of effect. We know that it was like an emotional send off, and it was also like, well, he's retiring. My body is starting to like really age on me. I don't know what kind of mental effect that has on him coming into the new year. He also had a child, his first child. So I mean, there's like a lot of off court situations aside from him playing in his injuries that come into play that weren't in factor in last year's 2022. Well, the match that has me most interested in the first half of the draw, in the first quarter of the draw, is the potential rematch that we have between, I'm already saying that Tiafoe has a really good shot of defeating Karen Khachanov. And if that is the case, then in the 4th round, we could see Nadal and Tiafoe. But potentially then, from both of your opinions, who do you have coming out of the first quarter?
I have Medvedev. I think it's probably, from a betting standpoint, the worst quarter by far to like take a quarter bet, because there's so many weird matchup things going on. Nadal has a gauntlet. Like I even think Brandon Nakashima is someone who deserves a mention. That could be 2nd round if he beats Mackie McDonald.
Right.
Nakashima and Draper by Wimbledon, I bet they're both seeded. So it's rough luck in the first 2 rounds to see both of them. Foe is there. Nadal will be hoping for Khachanov, who just can't beat a top 10 opponent. But it'll probably be Foe. I just kind of have trouble seeing him doing it again for some reason. But ultimately, I think Medvedev takes out Nadal in the quarterfinals eventually. You guys, I've talked about Medvedev and all the reasons why I think he could have a bounce back year. I do think, quick conditions are still pretty important to him, especially against a player who's not going to live at the net. Obviously, Nadal actually can do that at times, but I just think it's too much to ask. I'd rather look towards the bottom quarter where Medvedev Korda. I like that matchup for Medvedev a lot, to just use the pace and the defense and the consistency. Shapo is a very similar deal. I think that's a good matchup for Medvedev. If he sees Hurkacz, that's bad. That would be bad for Medvedev. But Hurkacz is on upset alert for me because he has had an awful mental block at majors. And God, the nerves have been so hard to watch for him in the first couple rounds at majors. He might have to play Lorenzo Sonego in the 2nd round, and that could be it.
Yep. I think Gill's read on this is spot on.
Yeah.
I was very much in the same mindset as you, Gil, that coming into this season, I was like, okay, like, Medvedev is a guy that shouldn't be trifled with. His ranking and just in general lack of kind of top line success in the last season is going to throw people off the scent. He's going to be a dangerous player. And I still think that's likely. But there's now a little bit of seed of doubt in my mind, having watched him play Djokovic. Mm-hmm. And I think this is weirdly the most important tournament of the year for him. He needs to probably exercise the demons and beat Nadal in the quarterfinals here to kind of get back to the level that he was mentally, because I always kind of considered him a guy that was cut from the different cloth. Like all of the other up and coming challengers ran into the big three and just, lost it on the court. Like they couldn't kind of get over the fact that they were, maybe actually going to finally do it. They're going to, enter the conversation of, an elite player. And Medvedev was never in that. He was kind of a different mindset. I thought he gets to the final of the U.S. Open that he lost to Nadal was sort of the light bulb moment watching him come up, where you were like, he was out of that match. It was not competitive. It was like, another up and comer gets blown away by the big three in a big spot. Like surprise, surprise. But then he fought his way back into that match and was very competitive. And it was like, okay, he's got a little bit different mentality. He's not afraid of these guys. Like, that's very cool. He backed it up with beating Djokovic head to head in the US Open, not the next year, but maybe 2 years later. I don't exactly remember the sequence. But beating him head to head was like, man, like very, very cool. Now Djokovic was, he was physically broken at that point to a degree. So, you can say there was a handicap in that match, but it was still impressive mental approach to coming into that match and getting that win as impressively as he did. So I kind of held him in higher regard after those, two particular finals. And I thought he was going to run away with the Australian Open last year in the absence of Djokovic. Nadal comes out of nowhere, really, with a magical run of form.
Medvedev, let's remind everyone about that. Medvedev was up 2 sets to love. He was up 3-2 in the third set. Nadal was serving love 40.
More. It was even more. Wasn't he up a break? He
wasn't up a break yet. No, but he was serving. Nadal was serving. They were on serve. Medvedev was up 3-2, and Nadal was serving love 40.
Yeah.
And then he wins the match.
It's like that your win probability live models at that point, 98%. I mean, it's like, it's very, very, very unlikely that your opponent's coming back, even if it is Nadal. And yet he did. And you come out of that match thinking, like Medvedev might be broken from that. Like that's going to have a shadow, right? Like that's going to have this is going to linger in his head when he goes up against the elite guys from here on in. And we didn't even really get the opportunity to see that much because he didn't make deep enough runs in any of the tournaments the rest of the season.
Like you said,
yeah,
you really did break him.
Yeah, like Kyrgios is getting the best of him on the regular all of a sudden now, and like just other guys that were coming up, like were getting the best of him, and he just didn't have the same killer mentality.
Well, I don't even think it's about the mentality. I think about Gil and I have had this conversation before that I think Medvedev's game has been figured out. If Medvedev stays complacent with just playing from the baseline, all of these players, they've gotten inspiration from Carlos Alcaraz, who said, oh my God, he has a full court game. He is doing the slice. He's doing the drop shot. He's doing all of these things. I need to start implementing that a little bit more. And we saw that with Tim van Rijthoven on grass against Medvedev, just absolutely destroyed him because he had such variety on grass and a faster court speed. Medvedev didn't have an answer for it. He was trying to play from the baseline. You can't do that. What are you going to do? And he kind of just stayed doing that. And it wasn't until, was it Adelaide? I saw him come into the net a little more. I was like, hey, this isn't you. This is not your game. He's probably trying to add a little bit more variety to his game. Gil,
could be.
Well, I just think from a court position standpoint, the big thing for him is he needs to keep his opponents off the net. More so than he needs to get to net himself. Mm-hmm. It's mainly the fact that he's dropping back 10 feet behind the baseline. It's giving a guy like Kyrgios or even Tsitsipas, who hit good approach shots and great volleys, his defense is rendered ineffective by really, really strong net rushing. So he needs to find a way to just be a little bit more stubborn with his court position to keep guys away from net.
Well, great. I am
That's
looking
very
forward to
fair.
seeing. That's a very fair point. I really like how you said that.
So where do we stand then with Medvedev after he loses to Djokovic in straights? It felt, watching that match, it felt a lot closer than the scoreline, I thought. Medvedev and Djokovic each produced break points in the same number of sets. Djokovic converted his, Medvedev did not. There's a realistic possibility Medvedev didn't really want to show his cards as to here's what I'm going to do in high leverage moments. If that was his tactic, very well played. Like, you lost all the high leverage moments, but if it was strategic, then bravo. If it was, I don't have an answer, then that's the problem. So I'm not like strongly in one camp or the other here. I think Medvedev should be a finalist at this tournament, considering his quality and the conditions
and history here, back-to-back finals.
Yeah, right. And even though the top is tougher, even though his draw is not easy, he should be your finalist against Djokovic. And then that match, presumably it's 3-1 Djokovic, but maybe if he can find some magic, it's a little more competitive. I don't know.
So Medvedev is plus 115 and win the first quarter. Nadal 275. Sebastian Korda plus 500. Tiafoe 1101. So it is rightfully favored. I'm not interested in backing any quarters for this tournament. I really just have my Novak features and that's it. But looking at the second part of the draw, I think it's really tricky. There's a lot of young, talented players grouped together. You have Stefanos Tsitsipas, Jannik Sinner, Borna Coric, who I'm super interested in seeing how he can fare in this tournament. Sinner, he's reached the quarterfinals in back-to-back majors, the 2022 Wimbledon, 2022 US Open. Borna Coric, who was out for a while from injury, he's come back. He's really done really well for himself. His last deep run was the quarterfinals of the 2020 US Open. Drew, what do you like about the second quarter?
I think this is a very even four-way contest between your top four seeds. I would put Sinner at the bottom just based on form of the four. I would put Felix at the top based on form of the four, but I think the fact that this is major tennis, best of five tennis, and Felix is a prove it to me guy in this department now in terms of really backing him sincerely in slam tennis. I can't in good conscience become a Felix guy for this tournament just based on form. So Tsitsipas is going to be tough. It's going to be tough for me to ever really be a Tsitsipas guy. I don't know.
Gil, let me make
Go
the case that I'm interested in Tsitsipas. Am I overvaluing him here in this spot? I have two features tickets, and it's one on Novak and one on Tsitsipas. Is that incorrect?
I like it. No, I'm high on him here.
Oh, interesting.
He's made the semifinals at the Australian Open in 3 out of 4 years he's played it. Not counting when he's outside of the top 50 kind of guy. Yeah. And the one time he lost was against Milos Raonic. I don't like Tsitsipas against big servers. I think his first round match is terrifying against Quintin Alice. If you look at the analytics of Alice's serve in the 2023 season, it's John Isner. It's John Isner stuff. I don't think his serve is as good as Isner's, but I'm looking at the numbers and that's what it's spitting out. So that's really scary. After that though, I think Tsitsipas, from what I've seen this year, is protecting his backhand pretty well. Just not trying to do too much with it and giving himself time on the second serve return, by backing up. That's how I think he needs to return second serves. I hate it when he stands up on the baseline for it. And it's still really difficult to break Tsitsipas's serve in quick conditions with his serve +1 and the way he's able to attack the net behind his first ball forehand. Section wise, you have Sinner. Tsitsipas has blown out Sinner in most of their meetings. Sinner does have a health concern coming in with an injury that honestly looked pretty bad in Adelaide 1, which was upsetting to see. And then you look at Felix and Norrie on the other side, which is interesting. But I actually think it's going to be Norrie.
Yeah,
Norrie to come out of the second quarter.
Price almost exclusively gets me here, but he's 6-1. The other guys are like 2-1. So
It's yeah.
Nori is 6-1 to come out of the second quarter. That's who you guys would be putting your money on. Interesting. Okay.
And I just think it's pretty close. Nori, let's bring up one other kind of key point about Nori. I have struggled to put him in elite, in the elite tier among the men's tennis players.
That hasn't even been a thought for me.
his stuff just is not impressive. But what is his greatest strength? Endurance. He can go the distance. He should presumably outplay his expectation in best of 5 tennis throughout his career. I think that's a fair expectation given the way he's built. You add to that, this is summer in Australia. Looks pretty hot first couple of days. There may be more heat coming week 2. We'll see. But the fact that this is, it's going to be challenging. It's going to be grueling conditions. It always is a tough test for people who, are coming off of layoff to, just all of a sudden flip the switch and, they can go 4 or 5 hour match, rebound the next time out. They can do it again. I think Nori is that guy though. And so that gives me a little bit more of hey, like battle of attrition, tough quarter, lots of long matches potentially, particularly in week 2 here. And the 6-1 price I think is good enough bet. Also, his first 2, maybe 3 rounds could be easier than some of the other guys.
Yep.
I don't know. You can argue which is the softest part of that quarter, but I think it's Nori's. So more likely to be there week 2. And then if it turns into just a marathon, I would stake him as my horse.
Well, it's interesting that both of you like Nori, because earlier we were talking about players who just come off of winning Adelaide and then they come into the major and then they stink it up in the first round. Well, Nori is about to play Gasquet tonight for the final, and then he has to also travel, and then he has to also, and I know that he's younger. He's only, young, I guess, young-ish. He's 27 years old, and Gasquet, he should get through him. I'd expect Nori to get to win this tournament, but he's also going to be coming into this with that. So do you guys have a counterpoint for that?
Yeah, I don't mind it here. First of all, because his first couple rounds should be pretty comfortable. And I think that's really where it hurts you. When you're first transitioning and you kind of get to Melbourne late, I think you're just vulnerable right off the bat. I really can't see him losing to Luca Van Asch. And he's just a fitness monster. Like, the rules of fatigue don't really apply to Cam Nori. So I think those are your 2 strongest counterpoints. I would like to see him not work quite as hard tonight against Gasquet, because, he did play a very physical match with Marcos Giron. Then he had to play Jensen Brooksby, and it was straight sets, but it's always physical. Also, though, but let's just say also, because I don't think we got it in here, he just looks phenomenal. He's undefeated.
Yeah, that's true.
He was incredible at the United Cup. He beat Taylor Fritz. The forehand down the line is the biggest thing that I just think looks money, which I've never really seen from him. So, yeah, I just think, like Drew, it's not that I think we're going to see Nori in the semifinal, but price-wise, he jumps out.
So for my notes, I actually had that this could be the year of Cam Nori. And so I'm interested. It's funny how you guys are both on him. I'm not, just because I am really a little bit higher on Stefanos Tsitsipas for this tournament, but I do agree that Nori could have like a really good breakout year just based off of how he's been playing. And I love how you said that forehand down the line, because I said his serve and his forehand down the line is really becoming a 1-2 punch. Those are his big weapons. The only thing that I have lacking for him, similar to Tsitsipas, is the backhand. It's still just more of like a counterpunch backhand, which could suppress him from winning the major, but he's definitely going to be like a threat to some of these top 10 players, top 15, 25 players. I'm interested in seeing a potential matchup between Quaritch, Felix, Wawrinka. They're still in the mix. I think this is just like a really fun, interesting draw. So I'm not going to be betting. I'm just going to take Tsitsipas on my futures, maybe to reach the final, but I'm not interested in backing really anyone in this quarter to come out, because I don't know. It's just interesting. It's fun. Value wise, I totally agree with you guys with Nori. I can't do it. Not yet. Maybe in the next tournaments. Now for the third quarter, this one is super fun for me, of course, because it's my man, Novak Djokovic. He is a -250 favorite to win the third quarter of the draw, followed by Nick Kyrgios 4.5 to 1, Holger Rune 7 to 1, and then Andre Rublev 14 to 1. the fourth quarter for me is the third quarter is definitely one of the most thrilling, only because of that Holger Rune potential matchup that we could have between Djokovic. This is the only tournament where, I mean, Djokovic, he closed out the year 26-2 record that including winning Wimbledon, his 21st major title. He won the ATP finals, looked absolutely stellar, and then hits a brick wall with Holger Rune at Paris, which was just like phenomenal match. That was really great. All the credit to Rune, who played exceptionally well in that. Last year was definitely a breakout year for Rune. We haven't really seen him play much since. So is he even going to be a threat in this tournament at all? Gill?
It's like that the eighth opposite Novak in this quarter with Rublev, Rune, and Kyrgios. I mean, it's mostly about Rune and Kyrgios. There's no more unpredictable section in this draw.
Right.
You know, Nick is unpredictable and Nick are just two words that go together. But Rune, like, you just have a huge sample size issue with Rune where you don't know who he is, because he, after, you know, on the clay, I think he proved himself last year. He beat Tsitsipas at Roland Garros. He had a really impressive title run in Munich. But then, like, he slumped so hard after that round of 16 in Paris, so hard. And then he went on an absolute tear and it's just, okay, where is this guy at right now? It's really, really hard to tell. And I'm just looking at a 19-year-old who is a top 15 seed at a major for the first time, who has not won a match in over a month and has expectations on him. Yeah. I hate that combination. Yep. So I'm not really into Rune here, but at the same time, he could come out here and show us that he's the truth. I could see both scenarios. I'm skeptical about Rune and Kyrgios.
Of course. I mean, Kyrgios isn't he also injured? He pulled out of was it Adelaide?
He walk over in Tokyo was the last time we saw him on the court, and then he elected not to warm up. Yeah.
So I'm never worried about him, because in a major, in a best of 5 2-week tournament, it's just too exhausting for Kyrgios. He just doesn't have the level of fitness that you need in order. And then the conditions, Drew mentioned it earlier, the conditions, it's going to be pretty hot in Australia for the first couple of days. That could come and weigh him down. Rune, the one match that he has played, he lost. So I'm not expecting it to be like a thriller or anything, but you never know with him. He's 19 years old and he could just be, hey, I'm playing Novak. Let me now just like show up. But Djokovic, I don't really see any match where that's really going to test him in his quarter. Maybe Pablo Carreño Busta. To me, that's more of like a warm-up. Rune, we'll see what kind of threat he could be, but Djokovic is coming into this not having played a full 2022 schedule. Towards the end of the year, he upped his reps. He beat everybody. He has that strong mental mindset. And more so for me, it was really important of how does he feel about playing here in Australia again, since he didn't play last year. He was in a great spirit with it, so that there's no harsh feelings. Everyone's been welcoming to him, so that's not a factor anymore. But one stat that I wanted to share with you guys and get your opinion on: the last 13 times that Nadal and Djokovic have both been in the same draw at a major, one of them has won the title. The last man who did not, the last man who is not named Nadal and Djokovic.
Can I guess?
Yes. And which tournament? When they're both in the draw, the last person who won.
Federer at Wimbledon?
Majors or tournaments?
Majors.
Majors, yeah.
Okay.
I think Federer at Wimbledon is my guess. In 2018 was that?
Bill?
I'm gonna go with Federer at the 2017 Australian Open.
Close. Both of y'all were close. It was Federer 2018 Australian Open.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
wow. Middle.
Flip a coin right now. We got Nadal and Djokovic.
Nadal missed the Wimbledon that year. Okay. Yeah. Wow.
So based off of that stat alone.
So what's Federer's price?
Huh?
So what's Federer's price? Should we bet Federer? Is that
Should we bet Federer? Yeah.
No,
bring back in.
Can I ask you a question about you, since you're the Djokovic whisperer? There are trivial reports that he's dealing with a hamstring injury.
No, they're real.
They are real, yeah.
There was moments in his Adelaide title where his serve looked kind of not as lethal.
Yes.
I guess. Do you have any kind of fitness concerns or questions about him, or do you think that ultimately this is, his level is so much higher that it's not going to matter?
So I will say that a few years back, when you could bet Djokovic to win every tournament, I was betting like 10x units on his futures.
Okay.
Confidently, no doubt.
Sure.
This time I did 2x.
Okay.
Because that hamstring thing is a real issue, and it's 7 matches that he has to get through. And even though I feel like his 7 matches could potentially be on the lighter side, I also didn't like if Medvedev was making fun of him. Making fun of that hamstring injury. Gil, do you have any additional insights? I feel like Djokovic he's always going to have the fitness, and he knows how to treat his body. There's a reason why he has the best flexibility on tour in probably any sport, let's be honest, because he knows how to handle himself and what's going to work for him. Gil, are we potentially still overvaluing him with this?
I'm not that worried about the hamstring. I mean, the important thing is that he's playing. Yeah. So he tweaked it in the semifinal in Adelaide against Medvedev. He played the final against Korda. He cut his practice short against Medvedev a couple days ago, but he took the practice court. Like, I just think the fact that he's out there means it's just not that bad. That's my read on it. I will say it's the sketchiest part about it is that it comes right after he's parted ways with his longtime physio. So his physio, Uli, I don't have the last name. His first name is Uli, had been working with him for like 5+ years. And he parts ways with his physio, hamstring injury right away. That's the only part that's a little sketchy about it.
It is Friday the 13th.
Uh-oh. Oh, it is.
I didn't even realize that he had parted ways with his physio. And then, go figure right after the fact. Crap. Now you're injured. Now what? What does that mean? I still put my trust in him because, like I said, like he knows these guys have been doing this for so long. He doesn't need to do a trial and error on what works, what doesn't. He knows exactly the procedures he needs to take, the measurements he needs to take, the amount of hours he needs to do, just stretch, whatever it is. I mean, he's talked about his regimen, how he spends an entire 12-hour day doing nothing but stretching and mobility work. Like, that's why he's the type of player that he is. So I put my trust that he's going to know how to handle a minor hamstring injury.
Well, considering this draw and the way it starts for him, I think we'll get a sense of if it's a big deal or not early, right? Like
against,
because there's like fractional percentages that he loses these first 2 rounds. Like is teeny tiny percentage, which means in a normal year he would just kind of play with this food a little bit, like let the match come to him a little bit, not really like play with urgency. I think if we see him play with some urgency and he's trying to keep his court time down and he's trying to limit the amount of miles run, then maybe it is in the back of his head that he thinks it matters, that he needs to kind of keep all of it in reserve. But if he's kind of the same old sort of laissez-faire, like I'm gonna win, I don't really care attitude on the court, then I'm not going to be worried about it once we see him start playing. So
I would be shocked if any of these early matches went to 5 sets.
I mean, realistically, people I've heard make a case for Karatsev because he broke out here that he's going to make a little noise. I'm not buying that. I think there's no one on the top half of his section that can push a set.
Busta.
So
can I say I think it's Busta didn't look great, and I just think it's a little quick on a slow hard court. I would like that better for PCB. The path I have for Novak when I filled out my draw is such a dream scenario. Now I'm sure I'll be wrong somewhere here, but I have Rublev in the quarterfinals, which I mean Novak would love to see Andre instead of Rune or Nick. And then I have Fritz in the semis and then Tsitsipas in the final. I mean, that is the kind of path where we could see maybe you win a major without dropping a set.
I think that's fair too. So I mean, realistically, his section is very, very soft. I don't know that there's a realistic threat that comes out of there, or really somebody that makes him sweat. The top half of the Q3 is fascinating. I love the discussion about Rune. So many whiffs of Alcaraz coming into last season where people were just so excited about him, and like sure that he was going to have a breakout season. And I knew people were just betting his price into just absurdity into the Australian Open last year for Alcaraz. And it was like, let's see it let's see it before we go here. And was he out in the second round, or really
No,
just was kind of
third round. He
Yeah.
should have won the match, but
should have won the match. Yeah.
To your point,
Yeah.
to your point, he was like so wired in the first like hour and a half of that match. He was just freaking out. So he lost the first two sets, and then he was the better player from there on out. But Berrettini got him.
Yeah, it was Berrettini. Oh, I forgot it was okay. Well, people were pretty. They wanted you because, and there's this momentum happens with every up and comer. Like the market, people who are making the market, they want to be like on the ride when the guy finally gets there. I would just tell everybody like, hey, look, if you want a piece of Rune, like go find a U.S. Open price, sit on it for 9 months. Like I think those conditions suit his game better. The fall like tends to be there's seasonality with tennis players. He looks like a guy that's going to do well in clay swing and then probably peak in the fall to me. So Rune is going to break some hearts at Aussie, maybe even in Indian Wells, Miami. People are going to be like, this is it. He's coming. Here he comes. And he'll lose matches he shouldn't. That's kind of the vibe I get. I'd also like to see what he's done to change and improve his game in the time since we've seen him last, because Alcaraz last year was a different player, different physical specimen coming on court to start 2022 than anything we had seen from him in 2021. Right. And I don't know what to really expect with Rune yet. What we saw in the warmups was kind of meh. So I'm out on Rune here, but at the same time, like putting your trust in Kyrgios in Australia, considering how long it's been since we've seen him, and
never put your trust in Kyrgios, even for match to match. Just skip it.
Yeah.
So the fourth quarter, then for me, that's must watch TV. You said that it was kind of, Drew, earlier, you said that the fourth quarter was kind of a little bit lackluster. I beg to differ. I'm really interested in this one. There's a lot of young players. I'm interested. Berrettini is back. Casper Ruud is there, who I'm a big fan of. Definitely gained a lot of my respect. Taylor Fritz, who's done really well in majors before. And then Jensen Brooksby. Just a lot of good up and coming players. This is a quarter for me that is so matchup dependent. I cannot properly guess who's going to upset who, but I'm interested in Fritz, but he doesn't have a good Australian Open record. He has 9-6 at AO, but his best appearance was a round of 16. Last year, he lost to Tsitsipas in 5. He is just getting closer to doing better in these types of scenarios where if he faces somebody big deep in a tournament, I feel like he's getting there. This is a different Fritz to me. He's starting to he wants to make some new data points. There's a new storyline for him that I really think this could be also like a really good year for him. So I'm more interested in Fritz. Casper, if this was like, I don't know, 6 months ago, I would say I'm super interested in Casper, but we just haven't really seen much of him. Made it to the finals in Miami. I'm super impressed because he did strides. A clay court player who made strides on hard court, but we haven't really seen him since the US Open. He did play the ATP finals, played the United Cup, but maybe he just has less reps than some of the other players. And then Berrettini, I mean, just because his 1-2 punch against the lower level players can definitely be effective, but later in the tournament. But I mean, Berrettini is one of those players where he's made the quarterfinals in like every major in the last like 6 that he's played. So he's doing a player that you can never just like sleep on as well. But Gil, I have no idea what to do with the fourth quarter. Do you have any opinions?
I'm pretty confident in Fritz. I think Fritz is the winner of this draw. And what I mean by that is like, if anybody should be elated with what they got, the hand they were dealt, I think it should be Taylor, who is looking at Kecmanovic, who hasn't threatened a good player since last March. He's been fine. He's been solid, but he just isn't scary. Schwartzman, I could see him not getting to the third round very, very easily. Zverev has the injury, and like you look at who is in his section and you're like, well, who's actually going to beat him here? But I think he's very vulnerable. It would appear that way. 0-2 coming off the injury. I think he's going to take a lot of time. Then you look at the bottom 8th, and you're right, Pam. I mean, Berrettini's an upset-proof guy. That's just who he's been. He doesn't take bad losses at majors, really. He does sometimes at smaller events, especially on hard court. But I love his mental game. I thought he looked really good at United Cup. He got a win over Casper Ruud, which was needed. It was his first top 10 win in about 2 years. And now he's looking at Ruud again, who I think on a fast court, Berrettini should just be better than Ruud, if it even comes to that. Because I'm worried about Casper. I just don't like the way he was playing in the matches leading up. I didn't see the Laszlo Djere match, but I saw his match against Thiago Monteiro. I saw his match against Berrettini, and he was way too defensive. And I'm watching both of those, even against Monteiro. I'm watching that match against Thiago Monteiro, who's like in the 80s in the rankings, and I'm like, if this guy was better, Ruud would be in huge trouble playing like this. Just way too defensive with the court position, the return strategy, not doing enough with the backhand. Maybe I'm a sucker for just reading in too much to like his lead up matches, but
especially since you said at the beginning, don't read too much into the lead up matches.
Yeah, but
they're telling you something though. They're telling you something, and that he's out of gas. That's my read. That's my read.
And that's a good point. Like, I didn't think of the February thing from that standpoint. Actually, I was looking at it like, okay, like that's a good idea for Casper. I'm glad he's taking February off. Like, but you guys saying, oh, that means it's the end of his season. That's a great point. That's not great.
He's out of gas.
So Berrettini has reached at least the quarterfinals in 5 straight majors, with his best run being a semifinal loss to Nadal in last year's Australian Open. Ruud coming off his first major final, which was he lost to Carlos Alcaraz in 4 sets at the U.S. Open. And Fritz, his best showing was last year's Wimbledon in the quarterfinal loss to Nadal in a tight 5-set and 5th set tiebreak loss. So Fritz is my guess. I initially had Casper, but I didn't know that he said, it's my end of my season. Now I want to pivot and say, Fritz, which is kind of funny because in my draw I have Fritz, but then in an article I wrote, I put Casper. So
I think the case for Fritz is very strong. In fact, like if he doesn't win this quarter, I'm going to have questions about him. You know, Gill said it exactly right. He was the winner of the entire draw in terms of a guy whose probability to win the tournament went like probably tripled based on the way the draw broke for him, right? Like he's in the softest quarter. He has warmed up well. He looked very sharp in the United Cup. Oh, by the way, like his most dominant performance in the United Cup, he beat the ever-loving bleep out of Alexander Zverev. It was not a competitive match at all. And who's the most tough? You know, who's the highest ranked player in his section? Zverev. So it's like, okay, well, you know, I think we have he's going to go into that match with a decent amount of confidence to get to a quarterfinal, and then the quarterfinal likely winner I have Berrettini. Fritz also beat him in the warm up. So it's like he's 3-0.
He's 3-0 lifetime against Berrettini. 3-0
lifetime against Berrettini. Has a recent skin there, just head to head. So it's. You know, he's should be coming in with just absolute superlative confidence and solid form. And he got the absolute dream draw here. I guess Cam Norrie got the better of him in a very, very close match in the United Cup. But we just have already kind of gushed about how good Cam Norrie looked. Otherwise, you know, he gets two tiebreakers he takes against Hurkacz, backs it up with 2 tiebreakers against Berrettini. Like if you're winning tiebreakers, that does a lot for your confidence too. Like you're just like, I'll take it to the tiebreaker. You know, like, you know, if you're kind of playing with that kind of house money, then you're a dangerous player. So I'm very excited to see what Fritz does here. I
Fritz
honestly
out of the
like
final then. If he ends up in the semifinal against Djokovic, what odds do you give him?
So Fritz needs someone else to take care of business there. I don't think Fritz beats Djokovic head to head, but if the hammy gets the better of him, if somehow, some way, you know, let's say Kyrgios red lines and has a lot more than we ever thought, and the crowd is just freaking brings him to a level that, you know, we've never seen before, and he takes out Djokovic. Like that opens the door for Fritz, I think. But I don't think he's opening the door himself. I think if you're expecting him to take his first slam here, and I bet into him at 20s and 30s. I took him all the way down to 20. Pretty decent stake on him. So I'm gonna try to capitalize as much of that as I can before we get to a semifinal, or before I would basically cash out effectively if it's Djokovic Fritz in the semis. But I thought his quarter price was wrong at plus 275. I bet some of that, but you can't get huge stakes on quarters. So I'm mostly into him to win this title, but he's going to need luck. He's going to need somebody else to take out Djokovic, and he's going to need whoever comes out of the top half of the draw to just have, kind of be utterly gassed. Like Medvedev goes 5 hours against Nadal, turns around and goes 5 hours against Tsitsipas. Now all of a sudden Fritz can get him in the final. Like that's sort of the luck that you need in order to get the final ticket home. But yeah, I don't think he's beating Djokovic head to head. However, I mean, I can't even really tell you who is his truly biggest challenger in his section. And I definitely, I think the bottom, it should be Berrettini. It could be RBA. RBA is kind of an Iron Man like Cam Norrie. He always goes further in this tournament than he Adelaide. Should. Yes, well, yeah, that's true. Like he could have cooked himself this week, and he might be dead man walking in this tournament. But
Jensen Brooksby, he could pull an upset that we didn't see coming.
Yeah, David Davidovich Fokina's got some impressive wins at the slam level, so who knows?
But yeah, he was playing well earlier this round in Adelaide earlier.
All of those guys are in Section 8 though. Yeah. So like he's only going to have to play one of them, and he's going to be a minus 300, minus 400 price against everybody except for maybe Berrettini or Ruud, who would kind of be like a small favorite against, I think.
All right, so then last order of business. Gill, I'm going to start with you first. Name the 2023 Australian Open finalist. Not who's going to win, just name the finalist.
Yeah. Djokovic, Tsitsipas.
Oh, I love it. That's what I have too. Okay,
nice.
So the odds on that is 8.5 to 1.
Okay.
Second favorite.
I just really like the way, if it gets there, obviously, I love the way Stefanos has played Daniil the last 2 times they've met on a hard court, where Tsitsipas has taken both. And I just think the head-to-head, which we used to think of as a pro Medvedev head-to-head, is looking very different these days. Tsitsipas actually has the 2 things that tend to bother Daniil, which is elite speed and elite net rushing.
Mm-hmm. Drew, name the 2 finalists?
It's going to be Joker over Medvedev 3-1. That's kind of the read I have on how this goes.
The odds for that is the favorite, 4.5 to 1.
Yeah, I think Norrie comes out of Q2 still. I think that's still medium confidence on that. And then I think Medvedev gets the better of Norrie in the semis, and then Joker over Fritz 3-1, Joker over Medvedev 3-1.
And then is there any first round matchups? Just name one if there is any. Other than Jack Draper, because nope, I'm not taking him.
No, I didn't stake that I'm not. That's a weak take. I have a big old bet on a guy that I'm curious if Gill can fill me in if I've made a terrible mistake here, because I didn't watch a lot of fall tennis. My numbers just crunching through, because you take the results and crank the box and this is what it says. My numbers say Marc-Andre Huisler. Is that how I pronounce it? The number 1 Swiss player now.
Huisler.
Marc-Andre Huisler. My numbers say Huisler is nasty. And he's playing John Millman, who's obviously a crowd favorite down in Australia, but I gave him over 70% chance to win that match. Wow. So I bet him pretty aggressively on the money line. That's moving. So I don't know that you're going to get close to the price that was bet there, but I like his head-to-head there against Millman. And then for a fun long shotter, guy that came through qualifying that was extremely impressive, at least by the numbers, Belgian kid Zizou Bergs.
Yeah,
did I pronounce it?
Well,
Zizou
technically you don't say the G, but I'm curious to see how
Burrs. Okay.
Yeah, just Burrs. Yeah,
Okay.
like Burris. But I'm curious to see how American commentators are going to end up saying his name.
Okay.
If they're just
Burris.
going to go
Zizou
with
Burris.
Bergs. Yeah, I mean,
Zizou Burris. Yeah.
I called a Davis Cup match of his, and like I went with Burris, like
Yeah.
as if it's like almost like Plaxico Burris. That's how he says it. But
Okay. He was so he's never done anything of note ever, really. He's a challenger level player, peak rank 128. But he was a meaningful dog against Adrian Andreev of Bulgaria in the third round of the qualifying, and he waxed him. So he's got good feel for the conditions, apparently. Three clean wins in qualifying, and not clean, not all three clean. One of them was 2-1, but just clean in terms of dominant, as far as my numbers tell me. So he draws Laszlo Giri, who we've talked about a couple of times now, who is among players who are true worthy top 100 players. I think he's a true worthy top 50 player.
he's pretty bad on hard court though.
He's the last of all of the guys on hard court, of guys who I think have talent to at least be considered in the top 50. He is at the bottom. So here we are in the super fast court against a guy who is absolutely in form. I think Bergs should give you a fun little run. He was 2-1 at one point. I think he's come into the 180 range, but that's still a fun way to try to capture a little value in round one for me.
Well, the only two tickets that I have is Djokovic to win and Tsitsipas as like a.
What's Gill's take on Husler?
Yeah, I love Marc-Andre Hussler. I think your numbers are on to something there. He's got
Interesting.
He's a lefty, a rangy, lanky lefty with a big serve who comes forward and volleys well, and his forehand is really good. It makes you nervous. Sometimes he'll start to miss a lot of forehands, but when it's on, it's really nice. And he's just a very fearless attacking player with just like better ground strokes than, I don't know, like Arthur Rinderknecht, who plays like a similar style, but just you hate Rinderknecht like off the ground sometimes. And I just think Hussler has cleaner ground strokes. So I love Hussler. I think he's great. It's interesting. He's a guy who I don't think expected at all to like make it in professional tennis, but he's actually really good.
Cool. He beat Holger Rune last fall in Sofia.
I know, and like just
got a title.
the quotes, like everything he was saying after that title, he seemed so surprised. He was like, "Oh my god, like I didn't." And now he's the number 1 Swiss player.
Yeah,
which,
there were some. There were what 5-6 ATP title winners last year that were just like, wow, what? Huh? Was the Van Richthoven you mentioned beating Van Richthoven over?
That was one of the best performances of
wild.
A no-name player that I've ever seen. That was phenomenal. He played so well, so spectacular, and then didn't do anything after. But in that tournament, he was damn near perfect.
Yeah, there were some wild ones last year.
Okay, so do y'all change your schedule like I do to watch Australian Open matches at 3 a.m.?
Yeah, so a couple of pro tips for you if you want some. For those listening who are trying to figure this out for the first time, how do I live my life and also enjoy the Australian Open?
I live my life.
Watching a screen or having light on at night can really kind of scramble your brain a little bit. So my go-to move is I listen to the Aussie Open radio.
Oh, interesting.
The radio broadcast is absolutely tops. They are so good. You get a ton of like tidbits, details, stuff that you're not getting on the television broadcast because there's no point in saying it if you can see it, right? And so listening to the Aussie Open radio broadcast in the middle of the night is a great way not to just completely wreck your life. But you need to watch a lot of tennis regardless to really get a feel of what's going on, and circle the matches that you think are high leverage in terms of how the draw plays out, and that's what you got to be there to watch.
Also, listen to U.S. Open radio to hear me.
U.S. Open radio, all of the major broadcast radios trump the television broadcasts, in my opinion, for the slams.
US Open Radio. And then I'm going to do that. 2 things that I've never done before: Australian Open Radio and US Open Radio. I am taking note of that. Well, guys, I appreciate you hanging out with me to talk tennis.
Great
There's
banter too, by
there's
the way.
no
Just
two-
outstanding banter. Love it. Love it.
There's
Love
no
it.
2 other people that I would rather talk tennis with than you guys. I have Drew on the betting side. I have Gill, who's just like super sharp when it comes to like just the game in general and the players. And I never would have known that it was Hoosler. Now I know something. So now I'm looking forward to that. So do make sure to follow Gill Gross on Twitter. Follow his stuff. He's Gill_Gross. You can see his stuff on the tennis channel, Cracked Rackets, and the Monday Match Analysis on YouTube. Follow Drew Dinsick on Twitter at whale_capper. He is the analyst for NBC Sports Bet the Edge podcast, and the Deep Dive podcast. And then, of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Pamela M35 and see all of my stuff at the Yahoo Sportsbook. But other than that, like, follow, subscribe, and tell us what you like about the Australian Open. Hold on. No, Djokovic.
Oh.
Gil saw it. I have now Djokovic t-shirts.
Oh, good.
I didn't think to wear it right now. Damn
Oh,
it.
well.
Missed opportunity.
I guess if he doesn't win the tournament now, it's kind of your fault.
It is my fault because I jinxed it by not wearing the shirt. I have 4 options to choose from. I'll be wearing one every match he plays. So thanks for hanging with me, guys, and we will see you at the next major.
Thanks, Pam.